November 12th, 1942. A crowd gathered in Richmond, California to watch what everyone thought would be a complete disaster. A 441-foot cargo ship was about to launch into San Francisco Bay, and here's the wild part. It had been built in just 4 days. Not 4 months, 4 days. By secretaries, farmers, and housewives who'd learned to weld a few weeks earlier. Traditional shipyards had been building ships the same way for centuries, taking 6 to 8 months per vessel. But this guy, Henry Kaiser, who'd never built a single ship in his entire life, just shattered every rule the experts swore was impossible to break. And what happened next didn't just change shipbuilding. It rewrote how the entire world thinks about manufacturing. This is the story of how one outsider embarrassed an entire industry and accidentally won a war. Real quick, hit that like button and subscribe, because what's about to happen is absolutely wild. We're talking a method the British Navy refused to touch, impossible speed records, and experts who had to eat every word they said. Turn on notifications so you don't miss stories like this. All right, let's get into it. December 27th, 1940. Henry J. Kaiser walks into a room and signs his first shipbuilding contract. Now get this, the guy'd never built a ship. Not one. His whole career? Moving dirt and pouring concrete for dams out west. He's 58, and he just promised to deliver 30 cargo vessels in 2 years. The traditional shipbuilders absolutely lost it, called him naive, an opportunist who had no clue. Todd Bath Iron Works reluctantly partnered with him, basically thinking their expertise would fix his mistakes. William Francis Gibbs, America's top naval architect, just watched. This guy designed more ships than Kaiser had probably seen in his life. Listen, Kaiser didn't care about how things had always been done. Ships back then needed 1 million rivets each. Metal pins you had to heat up and hammer through steel by hand. A skilled crew could install maybe 100 per day. Yeah, do that math. So Kaiser walks in and says, forget rivets entirely. Let's use electric arc welding. The maritime guys went ballistic. Vice Admiral Emory Land basically said welding's never worked at this scale, the British Navy won't touch it, and you're betting everything on unproven tech. But here's what Land couldn't ignore. German U-boats were sinking ships way faster than yards could build them. 3.6 million tons would hit the bottom in 1941 alone. Britain was literally starving. Traditional methods took 230 days per ship. That pace? They'd lose the war before catching up. So Land said yes, not because he believed it'd work, because he was out of options. Richmond Shipyard went up from nothing, and it looked completely wrong to everyone. No traditional setup. Kaiser built it like a car factory. Open areas everywhere, 7 building lanes, railroad tracks moving 150-ton chunks of steel around. John Riley from Bethlehem Steel shows up in May 1941 with 30 years' experience. His report? Kaiser's breaking every rule in the book. But then Riley admits something. The setup's built for exactly what Kaiser says it'll do. Fast assembly from prefab sections. Then the workers show up, and this is where it gets wild. Traditional yards hired from maritime families, skills passed down for generations. Kaiser? He put ads in newspapers. Anyone willing to work, 20% better pay, we'll train you. By October 1941, he's got 10,000 people working. Fewer than 200 ever touched a ship before. Traditional welders trained for 4 years. Kaiser's approach? 2 weeks. Learn one specific thing. Weld this type of seam over and over. That's it. Late 1941, early 1942. Something nobody expected started happening. Construction times began dropping. Fast. Kaiser's first Liberty ship took 197 days. Ship number 2? 169 days. Ship 5, 128 days. Ship 10, 97 days. By spring 1942, Richmond was cranking out Liberty ships in 70 days on average. Traditional shipyards watched their highly skilled crews getting matched by these amateurs. But here's what really messed with them. That prefabrication approach everyone dismissed? It was destroying the old way. Traditional yards built ships step by step. You can't install the engine till the engine room's built. Can't build the engine room till the hull's done. Everything waits in line. Kaiser said, screw that. His yards built entire sections at the same time. One crew's working on the bow, another's doing the stern, someone else is on deck houses, engine rooms, bulkheads, all happening right now, not later. When the pieces are done, cranes lift them up and welding crews stick them together. Albert Wooding, production supervisor at Richmond, spelled it out in 1943. Traditional shipbuilding? Everything waits. Kaiser's way? While one crew's welding hull plates, another crew's putting together the engines somewhere else. Both done. Drop the finished engine into the finished engine room, weld it down. What used to take weeks now takes hours. Get these numbers. Old method, 50 workers cramming into a tight space for 3 weeks trying to install an engine. Kaiser's method? 200 workers in an open workshop, 5 days, build the whole thing with its mounting gear. Then, 1 8-hour shift to crane it into position. Done. Now here's what really got under the establishment's skin. Ships had always been built from super detailed plans, every little thing specified. Kaiser used basic drawings with dimensions and let workers figure out the details. Traditional guys called it reckless. Kaiser? He called it flexible. Vice Admiral Howard Vickery started out fighting Kaiser's simplified approach. January 1942. He's saying ships aren't cars. You need precision. March rolls around. Kaiser's yards are beating traditional contractors by 40%. June hits, the gap's at 70%. Vickery later straight up admitted he learned that perfect is the enemy of good enough. Kaiser's ships weren't pretty, but they floated and carried cargo. And ships actually delivering stuff beat perfect ships still sitting in the yard. Spring and summer 1942, construction speeds kept climbing. And then competition broke out among Kaiser's 7 shipyards across California, Oregon, and Washington. His son, Edgar, ran the Oregon facilities. Clay Bedford handled the Richmond yards. Both ambitious, both driven, and they started this informal contest, who builds faster. Richmond versus Portland became a thing. Newspapers tracked it like sports scores. Records kept falling until September 1942, when Oregon shipbuilding knocked out the Joseph N. Teal in 10 days. 10 days. Remember, traditional builders were saying 6 to 8 months was fast. Vice Admiral Vickery eventually shut down the speed competitions, called them stunt demonstrations, said they were distracting from real work. But it had already done what Kaiser wanted. Workers at all 7 yards now believed crazy speed was the norm, not the exception. November 1942, Vice Admiral Land's visiting Richmond checking out production. He makes this casual comment to some reporters, and Clay Bedford happens to overhear it. Land says ship construction's gotten way better, but that 10-day record still looks modest compared to what mass production's doing in other industries. Bedford heard that as a challenge. He walks straight up to the Admiral and says Richmond Yard No. 2's going to build a complete Liberty ship in under 10 days. Going to cut the Joseph N. Teal record in half. Land's skeptical, but interested. Says fine, but don't mess up regular production doing it. Bedford picks Hull 47. They're naming it SS Robert E. Peary after the Arctic explorer. Sunday, November 8th, 1 minute past midnight. That's when the clock starts. Over 1,000 workers in coordinated shifts about to try something nobody's ever done. Listen, every major piece was already built and ready. Bow section with 50-plus parts, fully welded, equipped, done. Stern with steering gear, propeller shaft, crew spaces, complete. 4 massive cargo holds just waiting to drop in. The engine, this 140-ton beast built by Joshua Hendy Iron Works, tested and mounted before it even showed up. Traditional yards built from the bottom up over months. Kaiser's about to snap together a nearly finished ship from prefab parts in days. Sunday night, midnight, clocks running. 4 days in, the hull was done. Engine installed. Deck houses up. Cargo holds locked in. Steering gear mounted. Thursday, November 12th, 3:30 in the afternoon. 4 days, 15 hours, 29 minutes after the keel touched the building way. SS Robert E. Peary slid into San Francisco Bay. The crowd, maritime officials, military brass, competing shipyard owners, reporters from everywhere. Lot of them showed up expecting failure or some fake-looking thing that wouldn't actually work. What they got was a fully operational ship ready to go after minor touch-ups. Full service delivery? November 15th. 7 days, 14 hours, 32 minutes total from start to finish. Vice Admiral Land was there. Newsreel cameras rolling. You can hear it in his voice. He's basically admitting everything changed. 6 months ago, I would have called this impossible. Traditional wisdom, built up over 3,000 years, said you can't do a proper ship in 5 days. Henry Kaiser just made all that wisdom useless. And here's the kicker. The Maritime Commission will now require every contracted shipyard to use these methods. Get this. The psychological impact was immediate and total. Those same yards that called Kaiser an ignorant outsider 18 months back, now they're sending engineers to study what he did. New York Shipbuilding Corporation's president visits Richmond in December 1942. This is one of America's oldest, most respected yards. His confidential report to the board basically says we lost. Kaiser did the impossible because he didn't accept our limits. Treated shipbuilding like manufacturing, not sacred tradition. Simplified instead of perfected. Standardized instead of customized. Trained thousands quickly instead of raising craftsmen slowly. Ships in 1/10 the time, 2/3 the cost. Either we copy him or become irrelevant. By early 1943, Kaiser's way became America's way. 18 shipyards building Liberty ships using prefab and welding. Construction time crashed from 230 days down to 42 days. The US was launching 3 Liberty ships every single day, building faster than German subs could sink them. Now here's what really messed with the old guard, who was actually building these ships. Peak 1944, Kaiser's 7 yards employed about 196,000 workers. Over 40,000 of them? Women. That's 27% at Richmond alone. The 3 Northwest yards had 31,000 women by 1944. African-American workers by the tens of thousands doing skilled work. Welding, fitting, running cranes, supervisory positions. For 1940s America, that setup was pretty unusual. Listen, what really got to the industry was this. Kaiser proved complex manufacturing didn't need people who'd spent their whole lives learning the trade. You could train folks and get results. That challenged every assumption about who could do what and how work gets done. Christmas 1943 shows you how different Kaiser ran things. Traditional yards shut down for a day or two. Kaiser kept the lines moving but made it work differently. Management set up Christmas dinner right in the cafeterias. Turkey, ham, the whole deal, free if you're on shift. Local churches sent carolers through. Richmond Municipal Band played. Kaiser himself showed up, going around shaking hands, thanking people personally. By mid-1944, Kaiser's 7 yards had pumped out 800-plus Liberty ships. But check this out. His influence spread everywhere. Those 18 American yards building Liberty ships collectively hit 2,400 vessels by this point. Victory ships, the bigger, faster design that came later, used the same prefab and welding methods. Total American production 1941 to 1945. Over 5,500 vessels. Around 53 million tons of shipping. Commander Joseph Kenworthy from the Royal Navy was stationed in Washington watching all this happen. His take? The US is building merchant ships faster than the rest of the world combined. Kaiser alone cranks out more monthly tonnage than Britain's entire shipbuilding industry. The methods are crude by Admiralty standards. Ships aren't pretty, but they float, haul cargo, and there's thousands of them. Each Liberty ship could haul 2,840 jeeps or 440 tanks in a single crossing. The scale? Absolutely ridiculous. German U-boats couldn't sink ships faster than America built them. The math just stopped working in their favour. Combat losses came to 200 ships out of 2,710 total. That's 7.4%, which actually stacked up pretty well against pre-war merchant shipping losses. And considering these ships were crossing some of the most dangerous waters on Earth during active warfare, that's pretty remarkable. And those fears about welding being dangerous and untested? Total nonsense. 3 ships broke completely in half from welding issues. 3. That's 0.11% of everything built. Yeah, there were about 1,500 instances of significant cracks across the whole fleet, but complete breaks? Super rare. By 1944, they'd figured out better welding methods and steel specs that killed the problem entirely. The technology everyone said would fail actually proved itself under the worst possible conditions. The longevity numbers tell you everything about how well these ships were actually built. These were emergency vessels designed for 5-year lifespans, basically throwaway ships meant to win a war and then retire. Many kept running for decades after. Of the roughly 2,510 Liberty ships that made it through the war intact, about 835 were still hauling commercial cargo through the 1960s. 20 years after they were supposed to be done. Some got sold off to foreign shipping companies and kept operating into the 1970s. 30 years past their design life. Construction efficiency kept improving even as production ramped up. The first Liberty ships needed about 1.1 million worker hours to complete. By 1943, that average had dropped to roughly 486,000 worker hours per ship. Kaiser's most efficient yards, Richmond numbers 2 and 3, got it down to as few as 350,000 worker hours by running 3 shifts, 24 hours a day, and maxing out prefabrication. Cost efficiency matched the schedule improvements. First ships cost about $1.75 to $2 million each. By 1943, costs had fallen to around $1.3 million, despite rising wages and material prices. That's the learning curve effect in action. Admiral Chester Nimitz spelled it out perfectly in his post-war memoir published in 1960. Japan's military planners thought American industrial capacity was impressive but ultimately limited. They believed if they sank enough ships, eventually American logistics would collapse and force negotiation. They ran the numbers and figured attrition would work in their favor, but they failed to account for Henry Kaiser and what he'd done to American shipbuilding. By 1944, America was replacing shipping losses faster than Japan could create them. The mathematics of attrition favored the side building 3 ships daily over the side sinking 2 ships daily. Industrial capacity won the war, not battlefield heroics or tactical brilliance. The Pacific War got decided in the shipyards of Richmond, Portland, and Baltimore as much as on the beaches of Iwo Jima and Okinawa. Maybe more. War ends September 1945. Everyone's making the same prediction. The whole operation's gonna collapse. Tens of thousands unemployed, massive expensive facilities sitting abandoned, economic disaster about to hit these shipyard towns. Spring 1946. At first, the prediction looks dead-on accurate. Workforce crashes from 200,000 to under 20,000. Liberty production had ended in September 45. By December, most workers were gone. Those Richmond yards that employed 100,000 people at their peak, standing mostly empty by spring. Everything pointed to the Skeptics finally being right about something. The boomtown phenomenon seemed to be reversing hard. Richmond, California, had ballooned to over 100,000 people during the war. Now what? Ghost town incoming, everyone figured. Except that's not what actually happened. The physical facilities might have gone quiet, but the knowledge didn't disappear. It spread across the entire world like wildfire. When Japan and South Korea started rebuilding their maritime industries in the 1950s and 60s, they didn't try to reinvent shipbuilding from scratch. They studied Kaiser's Liberty ship program in exhaustive detail and built their entire industrial approach around what he'd proven worked. The massive shipbuilding facilities in Ulsan, South Korea, and Nagasaki, Japan, that would dominate world shipping construction for the next 40 to 50 years. Direct descendants of Richmond's revolutionary methods. Every prefab technique, every welding procedure, every parallel assembly approach Kaiser pioneered became the foundation they built on. John Bunker, professor of maritime history at State University of New York Maritime College, published his definitive study in 1972. His summary nailed it. Kaiser entered shipbuilding as a complete outsider, totally ignorant of maritime tradition, completely unconstrained by conventional wisdom, willing to apply manufacturing principles the established industry thought were inappropriate for ships. 36 months later, he'd built more ships than had been constructed in America during the entire previous century. More importantly, he fundamentally altered how ships would be built worldwide for the remainder of the 20th century. The modular construction, prefabrication, and welded assembly that Kaiser pioneered are now universal standards everywhere. Every modern shipyard, whether building container vessels in Korea, oil tankers in Japan, or cruise ships in Europe, uses approaches derived directly from Kaiser's Liberty ship program. And check this out, those ships designed for 5-year emergency lifespans, many lasted 50-plus years in actual service. SS John W. Brown, built in 1942, is still operational today as a museum ship in Baltimore. That's 82 years after construction, and it still runs. SS Jeremiah O'Brien, also built in 1942, is preserved in San Francisco and actually sailed across the Atlantic to Normandy in 1994 for the 50th D-Day anniversary commemoration, under its own power. After existing for 50 years, it crossed the ocean. SS Hellas Liberty serves as a static museum ship in Greece. SS Albert M. Bow, the very last Liberty ship built and delivered on October 30th, 1945, wasn't even scrapped. Got sold in 1964 for $65,557, converted into the fish cannery ship Star of Kodiak in 1965, and still exists today as the landlocked headquarters of Trident Seafoods in Kodiak, Alaska, 8 decades after construction. The economic ripple effect spread across American industry in ways nobody predicted. The massive steel requirements drove expansion of steel production capacity, particularly on the West Coast, where there'd been basically nothing before. Kaiser built the Fontana Steel Mill in California specifically to supply his shipyards, completed in 1942, 5 months ahead of schedule. That mill produced roughly 700,000 tons of steel annually and established California as a major steel-producing region for the first time in history. The magnesium needed for incendiary bombs and aluminum for aircraft got produced in Kaiser plants built to support the integrated war production effort. Employment effects rippled through communities across California, Oregon, and Washington in transformative ways. Richmond, California, grew from a population of 23,000 in 1940 to over 100,000 by 1943, driven entirely by shipyard employment. Kaiser built Vanport City in Oregon, which briefly became the state's second-largest city with a population exceeding 40,000, all of whom worked in shipyards or supporting industries. These boom towns, while temporary in some ways, demonstrated the transformative effect of concentrated industrial investment. Healthcare innovation emerged as a completely unexpected legacy. To provide medical care for his massive workforce, Kaiser partnered with physician Sidney Garfield to establish prepaid healthcare programs. Those programs eventually evolved into Kaiser Permanente, one of America's largest health maintenance organizations. The model of prepaid preventive healthcare pioneered in the shipyards influenced American medical practice for decades and served over 12 million members by the early 21st century. That's a direct line from shipyard innovation to modern healthcare. The workers themselves carried forward the lessons into decades of peacetime achievement. The shipyards gave thousands of young people, especially women and minorities, opportunities to develop capabilities they would never have accessed through conventional career paths in 1940s America. Those opportunities opened doors that stayed open for the rest of their lives. The confidence gained from proving they could do impossible work at unprecedented speed didn't vanish when the war ended. Listen, that maritime establishment that mocked Kaiser as an ignorant outsider in 1940? They spent decades after 1945 studying, analyzing, and implementing every technique he developed, every modern shipyard worldwide, whether building container ships in Korea, oil tankers in Japan, cruise ships in Europe, or naval vessels in America, uses methods that trace straight back to his program. The revolution he accidentally kicked off is still running strong today, 80 years later. Robert E. Peary. 4 days, 15 hours, 29 minutes. That one ship demolished every assumption about what's possible in manufacturing. Traditional wisdom had held industries back for literal centuries because nobody bothered questioning it. Everyone just accepted that's how it's always been done as gospel truth. Kaiser walked in knowing absolutely nothing about ships, which turned out to be his biggest advantage. He had nothing to unlearn. No sacred cows to protect, no traditions to honor. Here's the thing about those workers, the secretaries, farmers, housewives who built these ships. They weren't superhuman, they didn't have special abilities or secret talents. They were completely ordinary people who got a shot to prove what they could actually do when someone believed in them and built systems that let them succeed. That's it. The difference wasn't the people. It was the opportunity and the organization. The 2,710 Liberty ships that got built between 1941 and 1945 delivered way more than cargo across oceans. They delivered proof that human capability massively exceeds what experts claim is possible. Proof that we've always done it this way isn't a reason, it's an excuse. Proof that breakthrough performance comes from questioning everything, not from perfecting existing methods. Most of those ships are gone now, scrapped decades ago or sitting on ocean floors. But what they represented, that's still here, still influencing how things get made. Every modern factory using prefabrication techniques. Every training program teaching specific skills quickly instead of requiring years of broad expertise. Every manager who hears, "That's impossible," and responds with, "Or has nobody just figured out how yet?" That's Kaiser's legacy. Listen, December 1940, he signed a contract knowing zero about shipbuilding. November 1942, Robert E. Peary launched after less than 5 days of construction. September 1945, the last Liberty ship got delivered. In that window, he proved something crucial. Industrial revolutions don't happen through small, incremental improvements. They happen when you fundamentally reimagine what's possible and refuse to let tradition tell you no. The greatest revolutions come from people unconstrained by how things have always been done. Progress requires questioning accepted limits, not respecting them. Human potential exceeds conventional expectations when you organize properly and actually believe people can do more than experts claim. Kaiser's workers demonstrated that every single day for 4 years straight. That lesson carved into 2,710 ships remains relevant anywhere industries face challenges conventional wisdom says can't be solved. The ships carried the proof across oceans during the war. The lesson they proved outlasted the steel by decades and will keep going long after we're all gone. 4 days, 15 hours, 29 minutes, that's all it took to prove the experts wrong and change manufacturing forever. Sometimes the best way to solve an impossible problem is to not know it's impossible in the first place. If you enjoyed this story, hit that like button and drop a comment letting me know what you think. Should I cover more stories about people who broke the rules and won? Subscribe if you want more content like this. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.